Cafe Anyway. Yay.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
We are at episode 2345 today, 2345. It's Mike Matthews, your host.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
I had an interesting moment today where I heard a podcast I did years ago, and word up. That was the new expression at the time. No, the podcast was from like 2009, actually 2010, so pretty old. And back then, I still had
Mike's Daily Podcast.
this song, but the name of the show was called The Last Place on Earth, so it kind of sounded like The Last
Daily
Place on Earth. Yeah. Instead of Mike's Daily Podcast. And I wrote out the songs that I sang. The songs were longer back then, so yes, I've been more merciful for you lately. And yes, it was a longer song, and I wrote it out. And back then, I was a big fan of Obama's, and I was like, hey, what's up with the Republican Party? How come they don't want to help them get anything done? And I didn't quite understand the whole world of politics at that point, but yet makes you think how bad that was back in 2010, 11 years later, how much worse it's gotten. And since then, we've had a Republican president, and he had problems getting stuff passed, and now we've got this Democrat president, and now he has also the House of Representatives. So anyway, Cafe Anyway, the point being, government sucks, politics suck. Government can do good things, can do bad things. It can fix your sewer system going out to your sewage. If there's sewage backing up in the middle of the street, you don't want that. You don't want your power being out, which incidentally, yours truly has had a lot of that going on lately with the, not the government.
And here's today's podcast picture.
But Comcast, gosh, their internet, lots of internet issues last week. Twice, and for long periods of time, the internet was out. Don't know exactly what's happening with that. But yeah, that's first world problems, I know. But still, if I don't work from home as much anymore, I work a little bit from home. But it basically forced me, anyway, I would have had to go back to work. And I think a lot of us are going back to work, and we're doing the commute, having to drive again. And that's good for me, because then people are listening to podcasts again, and maybe they're listening to this podcast, Basil the Boxer. This is how Basil would sound when I would do a podcast. He'd be like, what are you doing? What is up, Mike? I got Basil back in early 2010, so the podcast I was listening to from November of 2010, which is, let's just say it is on the internet. It is in Google Podcasts. You have to look up The Last Place on Earth, which this is where Cafe Anyway is. Anyway, we say at the beginning of every show, Cafe Anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, The Last Place on Earth. And that's because the show was originally called The Last Place on Earth. Because way back when, the show was also called The Santa Fe Cafe. And that's a show I did for 11 years in Ventura County on a country station. And some of the characters you hear are from that. Now, the sound of the people here is actually from Portland, Oregon. Yes, I won't say the name of the restaurant / cafe, saloon, whatever it was, but I was recording this sound in 2013, and there were these people laughing and having a great time in the background, and that's what the sound is, and has been the sound behind the show for, I guess, since 2013. I started using this background sound. But I'm not going to say who it is. You'll just have to do your own research or leave it up for your imagination or not even care, which is what I would do, is not even care. Because it's not that important. So I was watching today a guy who's been doing a travel blog traveling from California to Florida. He's moving back home to Florida. He had been living in California. He gave up his apartment. He's got this thing about living close to Disney amusement park. So he was living in Anaheim, close to Disneyland, and he also had an apartment close to Disney World. And so he's actually moving back to Florida. He's going to stay permanently at the apartment near Disney World. But he's driving, since he does a travel blog, travel video channel on YouTube, he has been filming his trip back from California and has hit some interesting places. Lots of desert, of course. He's still in the desert. I think at this point today, he's probably somewhere in Oklahoma. But the last video, he was in just past Amarillo, between Amarillo and Oklahoma, hitting a lot of these small towns. And then the day before, he was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, I spent, because I also did that same trip, although I didn't go on Route 66 like he's doing. I did Highway 40, and oh man, Albuquerque had such a bad experience. Now, I drove through in 2007. This is way before Breaking Bad. And Breaking Bad has basically made Albuquerque, New Mexico. And people take tours there. They do pilgrimages to Albuquerque just because they love Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and the other show they did. And they go on a tour inside a old RV like the show had. And I don't know too much about the show, but this guy who does the travel blog, he's a big fan of it. And he went to all these places like a hotel that was used in the show. And it's interesting because all these places he visits, most of the people are not too friendly with him because they get this all the time, every day. People going by, is this where they filmed Breaking Bad? And they hate it. Even though it brought a lot of attention to Albuquerque, a lot of the folks in Albuquerque hate it, and they'd hate the attention, especially if it's a landmark. And it looks like too much hasn't changed in Albuquerque since they filmed the show, so which fascinates me because I lived in Ventura when the movie Swordfish, as we go outside a cafe anyway. We're bringing Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth. I lived in Ventura when they filmed Swordfish there with Hugh Jackman, John Travolta, Halle Berry. They actually, as part of the deal, because they filmed a lot of it in downtown Ventura, had to stop traffic a lot. Downtown Ventura got a lot of money, which they turned around and used to renovate, make it look nice. Albuquerque does not look nice. But maybe that's its charm. Maybe I'm missing it all. At any rate, going back and listening to an old show that I did 11 years ago, I was a little more politically active on my podcast, which I don't do that anymore because I know I'm not a political pundit. I don't have the historical knowledge. I've never worked in government. I've never been in a campaign for any politician. So what do I know? I've followed politics a little bit, but it's minor. So I don't infuse that into my podcast anymore. But there maybe was a little bit I was listening to in that early podcast that made me cringe a little bit. And cringing is okay. It is okay to cringe. And never let a troll ever tell you, oh, that thing you did that I'm commenting on is cringeworthy. You know what? Most of life is cringeworthy. Deal with it. You trolling someone is cringeworthy. You really should get a life. But over the last decade, the use of social media has skyrocketed across the globe. Whether people want to state their opinions on certain topics, express emotions, or share their pictures and video, not a day goes by without people logging into some social networking websites. As of 2021, 295 million Americans actively use social media, which makes about 3/4 of the country's population, that according to Statista. Since most of us have become quite dependent on social media, we sometimes end up posting things we later regret. From changing our relationship status to expressing controversial political views to sharing photos that we don't like anymore. We all have been there at some point and wish to erase those posts from the face of this earth. So it's nothing new. And speaking of which, the podcast picture today I've been posting a lot from the beach when we went to Half Moon Bay. I think it will be another Half Moon Bay picture because that was a fun time we did. I think this was on November 17th, so I will post a picture from that. See it at mikesdailypodcast.com. We all have been there at some point, wish to erase those posts from the face of the earth. However, scrolling back to old social media posts and deleting them one by one is a daunting task. Some people maintain that moving past social media posts is an impossible task because no matter how much time we invest in scrolling back to find those undesirable bits, we are bound to miss something. Besides, many users also believe that once something is posted on the internet, it will always remain there in one form or another. Whether your information is saved in the form of cookies, caches, screenshots, you'll always leave a digital footprint. And we're all doing it. Even if you delete something you post by mistake within a fraction of a second, what can you do about it? Is there a way to delete old Facebook posts? While the notion that nothing ever gets deleted from the internet in its entirety is still debatable, it's like that whole toothpaste thing. You can't get toothpaste back into a toothpaste tube. Well, there is probably some way to do it, but try it right now. It's not that easy. There are multiple ways to get rid of your old embarrassing social media posts. If you don't take the time or energy to delete, for instance, your Facebook posts one at a time, you can utilize certain software or browser extensions to do the job for you. You can look that up. I think some of that's going to cost you money. But there is that. How to get rid of old Instagram and Twitter posts. While deleting old posts from Facebook is comparatively easy, you don't do the same with Twitter because of the complicated user interface. On Twitter, you can select the advanced search feature and delete your undesirable tweets by entering keywords, phrases, or hashtags. However, if you think the task is tedious, you can opt for software. And some software will take out like 3,200 tweets at a time. Or you can delete your tweets based on the preferences you set. And that will cost you some money. As for old Instagram posts, they are the easiest to delete from your timeline, but once again, you will have to do it one by one if you go the manual route. On the other hand, you can make mass deletions by certain apps that there are. Now, some of this costs money, some doesn't, but what are you trading in regards to that? Don't know, like if they're taking special information that they're harvesting and using you for later. But that all from thelist.com. Thelist.com. By the way, someone who doesn't do much on social media, I don't think, but he does do things that get noticed and posted on things like Instagram. Banksy, he is pushing to convert a decommissioned UK prison into art and a cultural center. He plans on raising $13 million to fund the center by selling a stencil he used to paint a mural on the prison. The site was once where Oscar Wilde was imprisoned, and it holds cultural significance to the community. The elusive artist announced his plan to help transform the Reading prison in Bristol into a refuge for art, which includes raising $13 million to match the jail's asking price and prevent the site from being turned into a housing development. Banksy. There you go. We're outside a cafe anyway. The Ministry of Justice did not immediately respond to the request for comment on the sale of the prison. This according to the Business Insider, via MSN. We're outside a cafe anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth. Look who's here.
Hello, Mike Matthews. It's Chely Shoehart, gift shop supervisor. I really hate social media. Mike Matthews.
Why is that?
Because people are like so mean, and they're mean to me, and I'm mean to them. And the only time people care about me on social media is when it's my birthday, and I don't care about that, Mike Matthews.
That's all right. On this podcast I was listening to, I went by the name Michael Matthews.
Haha, that's funny, Michael Matthews.
That's right, look who else is here. Hello, Mike, this is Floyd the Floorman. And this is John Deere, the engineer, Mike. I don't think anything is ever cringeworthy ever. Good. Leading your life like that, or being a leader in your life, being not cringeworthy. I think what I'm trying to say is you're an inspiration to us all by doing that and not being embarrassed by anything, and that's wonderful. Good luck with that, John Deere, the engineer. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Benita, the Disgruntled Fiddle Player, the Brewmaster. If you would like to chime in about anything we covered, 336mm daily. That's 3 + 3 = 6. MM as in Mike Matthews. Daily as in what this podcast has been now for a couple days. We'll see if that keeps going. And if my voice gets any higher, we'll see if that happens. Stick around and we'll find out together. Excellent.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Do you know what I just realized here at the end of the podcast, the very, very end, is that today's FF episode was 2,345. That's 2345. This is the only time in the history of Mike's Daily Podcast that we'll have a number like 2345. I can't even remember when we had 1, 2, 3, 4. And someday we'll have 3, 4, 5, 6. But today it's 2345. Amazing. Can I get a ding? We got a couple of dings, and I'm a little dingy today. But thank you for celebrating this amazing milestone today at Mike's Daily Podcast. Make sure to check out all the old podcasts and all the new ones and all the podcast pictures at mikesdailypodcast.com.